This was the worst thing that I've ever seen.
He intended to burn that whole house to the ground with everything in it.
Both of these women, there was nothing left. Pretty much completely carbonized.
This is like putting a giant puzzle together. It's one piece at a time.
You take a look at how a person lives, a lot of times it's how they die.
You know, it would take a maniac to kill a mother and her daughter in that manner.
A shocking murder becomes a dark mystery. The victim's body holds the key to convicting the killer. Every fiber is a clue. Every wound is a piece of the puzzle. In these cases, it's up to the medical examiner to find the crucial evidence and catch the murderer. This is Secrets of the Morgue. Newton Falls, Ohio. A small, all-American farming town with a big heart.
Newton Falls is a pretty nice community. It's a nice place to work, nice place to live. A lot of very nice people there. I would say it is relatively a safe community. It's not very often a major crime happens.
3 days before Christmas, that all changes. When the Newton Township Police respond to a 911 call at the home of Wanda Rollison.
The homeowner, their granddaughter, Melissa Berry, had been trying to reach her and she couldn't. Melissa was very close with her grandmother, Wanda Rollison. In fact, they spoke on a daily basis. Melissa knew that she should have been home right after church. She noticed that her grandmother's car was in the garage, and she noticed some footprints that she did not recognize coming out of the back door. So she called the police department to come over and go ahead inside and see if her grandmother was okay. As soon as I got to the farm, I was met by Chief Tomeno.
This area was very, very rural. I went with Melissa to the rear of the house. There was a wooden door with glass windows. I could see a glass pane on the window had been busted out, but I could smell like smoke. So I entered the house. As soon as I opened the door, I saw a huge pool of blood and what looked like drag marks going through the blood. I definitely knew it was a serious crime scene. So I tell Melissa, get back out of the house, go out to my car. I felt possibly we had a hot spot in the house. I called the fire department to check it.
The fire department had determined that the fire was extinguished and was no longer a threat.
They also confirmed that the fire had originated in the basement, in the furnace room.
When I walked in that room, I wasn't prepared for what I was about to see. At the bottom of the stairs, I could see a pair of glasses. And next to that appeared to be a work boot type print in blood. The basement was split up into 2 rooms. The room on the right was more of a sitting room. And I could see that there were drag marks on the floor in blood that appeared like a body had been dragged through that room and into the adjoining room to the left.
I've kind of conditioned myself. If it's not totally the worst thing that I've ever seen, I'm okay with it. But this was the worst. I see a pile of ashes, big pile of ashes, large pile of ashes. And I see a human foot. I've seen a human body that was burnt in a fire, at a house fire, but never anything this brutal. There's a difference between seeing a body that's just burnt and a body that is totally like cremated. My main objectives was I had to get out. I had to get some highly qualified evidence technicians down there and make sure that nothing was contaminated.
Investigators need to determine how this church-going grandmother ended up brutally murdered. They turn to Dr. Humphrey Germanic, one of the most experienced pathologists in the country.
In forensic pathology, you explore the mysteries of death, and exploring the mysteries of death, you also explore the mysteries of life. My education began in 1973 when I lived in New York. I volunteered at the Manhattan Medical Examiner's Office, where I assisted in about 1,000 autopsies, and it was love at first sight.
We're very fortunate to have a medical examiner within our county that works closely with law enforcement. We all function as a team together.
Well, the first thing you do is you walk around the house, have a sense, grab a flavor for the place. A lot of times you take a look at how a person lives is how they die. So I go downstairs and see what I have. The first thing that I notice is there are 4 legs and 4 arms and 2 heads. Basically, it looks like we have a double homicide where 2 bodies were burnt in order to conceal the fact that it's a homicide.
At this point in time, they couldn't tell me who they were. I couldn't tell Melissa anything about the victims downstairs until we could confirm.
It can be an incredible challenge to identify a body that has been exposed to fire and to such a degree that major portions of their body are just ash.
Dr. Germanic takes what's left of the bodies to the morgue for autopsy.
You have to be very meticulous, very careful, very cautious as far as removing the bodies. You never know what evidence you might leave behind or what you're missing.
Identifying burnt remains, you have different ways you can do it. You can do it by dental records. Sometimes there is still flesh available, which will provide you with DNA. All of these things have to be looked at. It's laborious, it's time-consuming, but it can also generate tremendous evidence.
Dr. Germanic starts working on the remains in the worst condition.
They were severely charred due to thermal injury, pretty much completely carbonized.
Burnt into the remaining flesh, he discovers 3 pieces of jewelry.
There was a watch, an engagement ring, and a wedding band that were very characteristic.
The jewelry that was recovered from the remains were used to identify the first victim was Melissa's grandmother, Wanda Rollison.
Wanda Rollison was a very religious lady, very well known in the church community in Newton Falls. Just about any time the church doors were open, she was there.
She had been recently widowed. She was a just a sweet old lady in the community. Melissa was very close with her grandmother, and she had talked to her often several times a day.
Dr. Germanic turns his attention to the second set of remains.
As far as the second victim's concerned, a lot of her upper torso was intact, enough for me to photograph and document the fact that she had a gag.
You could tell that she had blondish hair, and she had a ligature around her mouth and wrapped around from her mouth to the back of her head.
All you have to do is lower the gag a little bit. I found she had dentures, and in her dentures was R. Claiborne.
Victim number 2, Rebecca Clyburn, was Melissa's mother and Wanda's daughter. A mother and a daughter had been killed in a very brutal way. Taking a human life is bad enough. But to drag 2 bodies in a pile and set them on fire, that's about as bad as it gets. It's sickening.
Chief Tomeno breaks the news to Melissa that her grandmother, Wanda Rollison, and her mother, Rebecca Clyburn, are victims of a brutal double homicide.
When I had to tell Melissa that her mom and her grandmother had both perished in this crime, feeling badly is an understatement. I can't say the reaction was anything that I had seen before. There was a lot of remorse for Grandma. There was tears, a lot of crying. But for her mom, it's almost as if she had expected that something like this would happen with the path that she had chosen.
Rebecca Clyburn struggled with addiction for years. She ran with the drug crowd. She was always in trouble. She was always in the court system. Crack cocaine was her drug of choice.
Rebecca Clyburn was a very pretty girl. However, through the years, you could see her body was deteriorating. She was totally hooked. Melissa was not very happy with the fact that her mother was involved in drugs.
Detectives soon learned that Rebecca wasn't the only family member with an addiction problem.
One of the first things Melissa said was, maybe my brother had something to do with this.
Melissa had mentioned that Nathan, her brother, also struggled with addiction. And that some weeks prior had broken into Wanda's home and had stolen hypodermic needles.
So we wanted to locate Nathan and either confirm or clear him from being involved.
While investigators search for Melissa's brother, Dr. Germanic needs to determine how Wanda and Rebecca died.
In types of cases like this involving fire victims, one of the first questions you need to ask is, were they dead or alive at the time of the fire?
Forensic pathologists look to see if there is any element of smoke inhalation. And one of the things that we look for is cherry red discoloration. The carbon monoxide that is created in a fire gets breathed in, then binds tightly to the blood, and it changes the blood. It will have this cherry red discoloration. In a victim like Wanda, where the fire has consumed that part of the body, there is no way you can check for smoke inhalation. Rebecca, on the other hand, did have an airway. However, she was gagged, and therefore that prevented soot to be deposited into her airway.
There's only one other way to test for carbon monoxide.
It's difficult, but what you want to do is draw a carbon monoxide level from the blood sample. As far as Rebecca was concerned, the upper part of her torso was still intact. We basically tried to get as much blood as we can, and we had enough for carbon monoxide, and we had enough for toxicology.
Wanda's body is so badly damaged that finding intact blood vessels is nearly impossible. But after 8,000 cases, Dr. Germanick's needle skills are unparalleled.
Any good forensic pathologist knows how to milk an extremity or where the blood vessels are and see what they can get with a good needle and a syringe. What's going to be important here? How much do I have of sample, and how do I best utilize this sample?
The carbon monoxide test results come back conclusive.
If you take a look at Rebecca's carbon monoxide level, it was a 7.8%, which means she was dead before the fire started. If you take a look at Wanda's carbon monoxide level, it was 0, which again means she was dead before the fire started.
Armed with this new information, detectives hunt for the source of the fire.
Downstairs, we noticed there's residue all over the basement floor around the area of the fire. It was very similar in color to dried blood.
Kind of looked like paint or wood stain of some sort.
Detectives wonder if this substance was used to start the fire.
Is it gasoline? Is it oil? Is it some other substance that hasn't been readily identified? It's the fire marshal's duty and function to take samples and to have those items tested to identify just what that accelerant is.
The investigators from BCI confirmed that it was dextane.
Investigators believe that the assailant covered the bodies in it, thinking it would annihilate the evidence.
I believe his initial intent was probably to burn the house down and burn the bodies up in the house. That didn't happen. You're in a basement, cement floor, cement block walls. Got wood rafters above your head, but the fire never got that high. So he used the wrong material.
We had went upstairs, and really it wasn't in total disarray at all. One of the rooms had a jewelry box. The contents had been spilled out onto the bed. And in another room, there was a woman's purse. You would think that if it was a random burglary, they would have ransacked the entire house. And that wasn't the case. In fact, it was very little was disturbed. Somebody that was in there knew what they were after. When you have a run-of-the-mill burglary, there may be a physical confrontation associated with that, I can understand. But when you have two bodies in a pile and they were burnt, this is personal. Now we know that we're looking for a killer that went to great lengths to conceal his crime. He intended to burn that whole house to the ground with everything in it.
Detectives believe Wanda Rollison and her daughter Rebecca Clyburn were murdered by someone they knew. They finally tracked down Rebecca's son, Nathan.
Nathan was apprehensive about talking to us because he thought he had some traffic-related warrants. We explained that we weren't interested in any of these warrants, that we wanted to talk to him about the death of his grandmother and his mother.
Wanda's husband died the year before and had left her quite a large sum of money. And there was reports from people from Wanda's church that she broke down and was crying with one of her church members and said, "My daughter and my grandson are on drugs, and I can't handle it no more, so I'm telling them no more."
Nathan, he admits that Wanda had been giving him large amounts of money on a daily basis to support his drug habit. But Nathan had a strong alibi. He told us that he had worked for a pasta manufacturer through a temporary agency, and that through this temporary agency they have tickets that they punch, and it's all logged in the computer. He told us he loved his mother and grandmother and was devastated by what had happened. After we talked to him, we were pretty convinced that he wasn't our guy.
With their prime suspect cleared, detectives turned to Dr. Germanic for the cause of death.
I took over 70 x-rays on both of them trying to find anything that would be indicative of a gunshot wound, a stab wound. We were extensive. If they were shot, I couldn't find any evidence of that. If they were stabbed, I couldn't find any evidence of that.
Criminals are always learning. They're always studying the techniques and habits of other criminals, and they learn quite a bit from TV shows. And this has an effect in terms of improving the kinds of techniques they use to commit crimes.
In the absence of hard evidence, Dr. Germanic uses a tool that's taken 40 years to hone: his expert opinion.
If you take a look at Rebecca, the fact that she had lacerations tells me she was probably struck with some type of blunt object. She also had some blood on the brain, so again, we're talking with some type of cranial cerebral injury. I believe blunt force trauma was applied after the gag. So I declared her cause of death asphyxia along with blunt cranial cerebral trauma.
Melissa's grandmother's story, however, may never be told.
There simply was not enough left of Wanda to make a decision or diagnosis within reasonable medical certainty. So I declared her cause of death as homicidal violence at the hands of another.
Determined to get justice for Melissa, detectives hit the streets, searching for anyone with a grudge against her mother or grandmother.
When you have somebody that dies by being bludgeoned to death, it was not likely done by a stranger, and it was done by somebody that knew both of these victims. And at this point in the investigation, we know that Rebecca Clyburn has a lot of associates that live in the drug world. It intensifies your investigation because they tend to shy away from contact with law enforcement. Several days later, we got a tip. So at this point, we're very excited. This tip was from an employee at a diner who worked with a girl that had said her boyfriend had been involved in a big crime.
First, we interview him and find out what the coworker told him. He says she was at the restaurant bragging about what her boyfriend had done. The coworker tells us that she actually pulled out Wanda Rollison's credit card and showed him that she had the credit card. We find out that the coworker's name is Amy.
Well, we learned that Amy Coral, she had a warrant, and we learned through the court of her address, and we sent officers out to her house to locate her.
Amy has a record, but until now, her crimes have been minor league.
So we track her down and we pull her in for questioning. Now, at this point in time, Amy is a very, very viable suspect, so she is actually placed into custody.
We interview her for quite some time. And she tells us she has nothing to do with this murder, but she knows who was. She gives us the name of a suspect with the street name of Jazz.
Investigators keep Amy in custody while they head back out to find Jazz.
We've got our work cut out for us. When you deal with street people, everyone has a nickname. Nobody ever knows what anybody's last name is. You go crazy chasing these people down and trying to find out who they are.
When your victim is living a transient life, the people that they associate with are also transient. And generally speaking, they are also living a high-risk lifestyle. There may be mental health issues involved, there may be drugs involved, there may be alcohol involved, and it makes it a very, very difficult and laborious investigation.
Detectives start combing through murder victim Rebecca Clyburn's neighborhood.
I mean, we were confident that this was done by somebody that was close to her. So we started down around the apartment complex of where Rebecca lived. And we started running license plates down there and doing plate checks on vehicles. And ultimately, we come up with a Jasmine McIver is living nearby the apartment.
Detectives ask Jasmine if she knows either Rebecca or Wanda and question her about the night of the murder.
So we interviewed Jasmine, and she says that she didn't kill anybody, wasn't involved in any murder. She did tell us, however, that she gave a ride to Newton Township with her friend Rebecca Clyburn and some guy that she calls Maniac.
For investigators, it's the break they've been looking for. Wanda's house is in the heart of Newton Township.
We need to find out what she knows, who she took there, and for what purpose. And we need to find out who is Maniac.
Investigators believe a local drug dealer known as Maniac may be involved in the murders of Melissa's mother and grandmother.
Police departments in this area have files on nicknames, street names, and one of the things we do when we book someone into a county jail or into a city jail is we get all that information. That's all in a database. Jermaine McKinney was one that was known as Maniac. The guy has a tattoo on his stomach that says convict. And he had a long history with police.
We learned that Jermaine McKinney has a relationship with Amy Coral. She was supposedly pregnant by him. We know that Jermaine McKinney was also friends with Jasmine McIver.
And according to Jasmine, Rebecca Clyburn was also known to be the girlfriend of Jermaine McKinney.
If McKinney was associated with Rebecca, I'm sure he knew that her mother was financing her drug habit. So in my opinion, he wanted a piece of that. So he saw it as an opportunity to go out and victimize her and her mother to get this money. We got another tip by a police officer in another jurisdiction that this female identified as Kiara Riley had been talking to friends about this crime that she was involved in with a guy that she calls Maniac, AKA Jermaine McKinney. We make contact with her, and she agrees to come to the sheriff's office with us and be interviewed. Chiara tells us that Jermaine McKinney has planned to rob this old lady of $50,000 and asks her if she'll be the getaway driver in this robbery, and she agrees to it.
Chiara was a very volatile girl for us to interview because she had never been involved in anything like this.
We need to find out what she knows. We turned up the heat a little bit, and you know, through our investigative technique, we were able to slowly extract the truth out of her. We had her understand, you know, what her involvement was in this case, even by just driving them out there.
Chiara was terrified. She decided it might be best to work a deal, and so she started to cooperate. According to Chiara, McKinney tells Rebecca Clyburn that he wants to go out to her mom's house in Newton Township to have sex.
Chiara and Jasmine drive Rebecca and McKinney out to the Newton Township residence and drop them off. Jasmine really didn't know what was going on. She didn't know there was going to be this robbery. So they go back to Jazz's home as instructed. After a short time later, they get the phone call. Jasmine now drives she and Chiara back out to Newton Township to pick them up. Chiara tells us that she goes into the residence and she sees blood all over. She told us that she had never seen a dead body before and that she was very upset by the sight of that. McKinney said he was going to rob her. He didn't say anything about killing her.
According to Chiara, McKinney lied to them all.
It helps explain what a horrible event these ladies went through. And it actually helps explain what a crazed maniac we were dealing with.
When McKinney comes out to the car, he has a laundry basket full of bloody clothes. Chiara notices that his boots are covered in blood. And she tells us also that he had a crowbar inside that basket that was covered in blood.
That kind of put the icing on the cake for us as far as the murder weapon for Rebecca.
It's a critical lead, but investigators want it confirmed by science.
The injuries that I found on Rebecca are consistent with being assaulted with a crowbar. She had multiple bruises or contusions to her face. She had a skull fracture.
Investigators question Chiara on the whereabouts of the crowbar.
They drive to an area in the city of Youngstown where there's a lake called McKelvey Lake. There's a bridge that goes across the lake. And McKinney tells Jazz to stop on the bridge. He gets out of the car and he throws a rug with a crowbar in it, and he throws a pair of his boots that were covered in blood over the railing into the lake. If you threw something off the bridge, it would sink to the bottom and get swept away by the current or, you know, move around. You probably would never find it again.
For investigators, that missing weapon is the best chance they have to get justice for Wanda and Rebecca. Detectives hope to retrieve the only piece of evidence that could put Wanda and Rebecca's killer behind bars.
My officers go out to the bridge at McKelvey Lake. They find evidence in that lake all the time. That's a favorite drop point for crime is to go across McKelvey Lake and throw something off the bridge. And while the officers are there, a member of the crime lab from Youngstown pulls up to them and asks them what they're looking for. So the officers tell them it's a crowbar and a pair of boots. The officer from the crime lab said, well, we found that yesterday. It's in our evidence room. What McKinney didn't figure is that in the wintertime, lakes freeze. So his evidence didn't sink. It was on top of the ice.
Dr. Germanic and his team set to work testing the crowbar and boots for physical evidence. If he can link the items to the murders and to McKinney, detectives will finally have enough to charge him.
You only have one chance at it. You have to be as thorough and complete as possible. You have to remember there's very little margin for error in our profession. There are innocent people in jail for crimes that were never committed. There are murderers walking the streets for free because of lousy forensics.
They test the boots and the crowbar, and they find Rebecca and Wanda's blood on them. On the boots, there's a DNA profile to another person. Because McKinney had been in trouble with the law in the past, his DNA and his fingerprints are on file. When they test the boots, they find McKinney's DNA inside the boots.
It's a stunning victory for Dr. Germanic and his team.
No crime is done in a vacuum. There's always something that is left behind.
Killers that use fire have this idea that by burning everything, you've destroyed any possibility of the investigation turning towards you is a very, very false hope.
McKinney was very careful to try to conceal as much evidence as possible, but he missed a lot. That's what burned him. That and pure stupidity.
Detectives search for McKinney.
It's an all-out manhunt at this point. We're looking for him. He's dangerous. We want to get him into custody as soon as possible.
We find him holed up in a house in Youngstown.
At this point, he's in a desperate situation. Officers try to take him into custody, at which time they were met by gunfire.
After a 3-hour standoff with police, McKinney is taken into custody.
His statement was, the only reason I stopped shooting is I ran out of bullets. That's why he gave himself up. I just thank God that none of the police officers got injured.
As Jermaine McKinney's trial approaches, investigators piece together what happened the night of the murders.
This robbery was in planning for probably a week or so before it actually had taken place. Jermaine McKinney had enlisted the assistance of Keota Riley and Jasmine MacGyver. He told them, you guys are gonna drop Rebecca and I off under the guise of having sex. I think Rebecca went out there with McKinney with the intent of robbing her mother. And she hadn't any idea that either of them would be killed. I think he had sex with Rebecca, and he tied her up, he beat her with a crowbar, and he killed her. And then he waited for Wanda to come home. And when Wanda came home from church, he throws her down the stairs.
When she hit the bottom of the steps, her glasses broke.
And then he tried to conceal his crime by putting two human beings in a pile, dumping deck stain all over them, and lighting them on fire.
Dr. Germanick's expert opinion on cause and manner of death is a critical piece of the prosecution's case.
This case initially was a circumstantial case. Two bodies together, drag marks and blood, incineration. The fact Rebecca had lacerations tells me she was probably struck with some type of blunt object. She was gagged, and I had enough evidence there to say they'd be consistent with asphyxia. So you had a combination of those two things.
Jermaine McKinney is convicted of Wanda and Rebecca's murders. He's sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole.
That felt good. There's a sense of accomplishment that you've done something good for the community, and you've taken a killer off the street and packed him away where he belongs.
You know, if anybody deserves a death penalty, it was Jermaine McKinney. To kill 2 people in the manner that he did. But it wasn't a unanimous death penalty verdict, so we gotta live with it.
Kiara Riley received 3 to 10 years for helping McKinney cover up the crime.
Kiara was the second in command for sure. She knew exactly why he was going out there to rob her. I mean, whether she knew that he was gonna kill them both, I don't know. But she could have walked out and said, you know, this isn't what I signed up for, I'm out of here. But she continued to participate. Jazz got pretty light sentenced. She really didn't know what was going on.
Amy Corll is charged with theft related to the incident.
Cases like this actually affect you. You never forget some of the details. You go to your grave with these thoughts. That's hard to take, hard to take. But at the same time, there's a sense of closure that Melissa really needed. She needed to know that this part of her life is closed book.
It's a time of grief for everybody. You have to have compassion, you have to be kind. It's a scar. Never heal, never go away. But with each passing day, hopefully it'll get smaller and hurt less.
Insurance fraud in the UK is reaching epidemic levels, and it's costing us billions of pounds every year. Deliberate crashes, bogus personal injury claims, even fake deaths. The fraudsters are risking more and more to make a quick killing. And every year, it's adding up to £50 to your insurance bill. Insurers are fighting back, armed with covert surveillance systems.
The equipment that we have to use has to be cutting edge. It's as simple as that.
Sophisticated data analysis techniques.
This is connected to a bank account and a second mobile phone number.
And a newly formed dedicated police unit.
Police, get back!
They're catching the criminals red-handed. All those con men, scammers, cheats on the fiddle, now they're caught in the act and claimed and shamed. Today, the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department is on the trail of 3 suspects.
Does he reside here, sir?
Yes, he is in bed. He doesn't need to be disturbed.
Well, we need to speak to him, sir.
A gang who deliberately cause road traffic collisions is targeted.
It is a matter of time before someone is seriously hurt.
And the camera never lies, even if fraudsters do.
I see quite a lot of surveillance evidence, but even I was quite shocked. The deceit level was probably the biggest that I've ever seen.
Herne Bay, on the Kent coast, was the perfect place for ex-policeman Michael Hoare to enjoy his retirement, until a road traffic collision caused by another driver left Michael injured and his car damaged. He submitted a claim on the insurance of the driver responsible. Susan Evans is fraud operations manager at the insurance company that handled the claim.
Mr. Hoare stopped at the entry to a roundabout and our policyholder had collided with the rear of his vehicle.
The claim included a list of the injuries that Michael had suffered.
The injuries that Mr. Hoare alleged to have been suffering with were a whiplash to the back and to the neck, an injury to his left foot and his left knee, and some psychological problems, including flashbacks of the accident.
He was claiming for a significant level of injury, which would require a hefty payout.
We were probably looking at between about 30 to 40,000 in relation to the claim itself.
The large claim also included the cost of a piece of equipment more associated with leisure than pain relief.
Mr. Hoare put a claim in for £2,300 for a hot tub.
With such extensive injuries, it seemed likely that the policyholder's car would be a write-off, but this was not the case.
There was about £1,500 worth of damage to our policyholder's vehicle, which is not a significant accident by any stretch of the imagination, and the injuries that were being complained of as the medical evidence was materialising were far more severe than one would have anticipated.
The inconsistency between the extent of the injuries and the relatively minor damage to the vehicle set alarm bells ringing. The insurer needed to get to the truth. The best way was to go undercover. The insurer called on the services of a group of investigators who specialise in concealed cameras and covert filming.
Our role is simply to remain covert at all times, to go in, take footage and take as much footage as possible so that the courts can form a correct legal opinion of someone's ability or disability.
Surveillance took place on the same day that Michael had to attend an examination.
On the day of his medical, presented himself as a person who needed a walking aid, who was very, very ill. He was kind of almost shuffling along. At one stage, he stopped and clearly appeared to have some form of twinge in his back, and presented himself as someone with a significant disability.
The footage supported Michael's claim, but the surveillance group had their suspicions.
This is a man who I suspect that he's under surveillance at that given point in time and wants to portray himself in a certain way.
However, other footage revealed Michael taking part in an activity that blew apart the deception.
We saw him drag out from behind his property a fairly substantial powerboat on a trailer, attach it to a 4x4 and then drive it off to the local harbour. And our last sighting of him was him sailing off into the sunset.
Under the sharp focus of the surveillance cameras, it was apparent that this former pillar of the community was trying to cheat his way to a payout that he didn't deserve.
What's kind of shocking about this particular case is that we're dealing with an ex-police officer who would have been exposed to investigating fraud and crime on a day-to-day basis. So one would think that he would have a strong sense of right and wrong.
I see quite a lot of surveillance evidence, but even I was quite shocked. The deceit level was probably the biggest that I've ever seen. I think he was a very, very good actor.
With the insurer now certain the claim was fraudulent, the decision was taken to pursue the matter in a criminal court.
A decision was made to take it to a criminal court and allow a judge to decide the outcome.
Before the trial, Mr. Hoare tried to claim that the person in the footage was in fact his brother, but that was a lie too.
There was no resemblance to his brother at all.
The case proceeded to trial. Despite the formidable amount of evidence against him, Michael initially pleaded not guilty. But the footage was so compelling that something highly unusual happened in court.
Sometime into the trial, the judge stopped the proceedings and suggested that it would have been within Mr. Hoare's best interests if he pleaded guilty. He did eventually plead guilty and received a 6-month suspended sentence for 12 months. For us, actually getting the genuine claims settled quickly and efficiently, and weeding out these fraudulent claims is a good day's work.
A road crash gang that targets innocent drivers.
I think the whole experience for the young girl was shocking and terrifying.
And some photos of crash damage are decidedly dodgy.
The expert found that those images had been tampered with, they'd been altered, they'd been taken from different cameras.
In the fight against the growing problem of insurance fraud, an elite police squad have come together to form IFED, the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department.
Insurance fraud isn't a victimless crime. £50 of each premium you pay each year goes to the fraudsters. We have been set up to tackle that problem.
This dedicated team works tirelessly to bang up the crooks and con men getting rich off other people's money.
Please get back!
It is our intention to create a climate of fear for the fraudster. There's every chance that an IFED detective may come knocking on their door to arrest them for committing an insurance fraud.
Police, don't move, stay where you are!
By April 2012, after only 6 months of operating, they had already busted 80 fraudsters, adding up to £12 million of fraud under investigation.
These people are criminals. These are nasty people. They don't go out to work on a Monday morning like most people do. Their work is submitting insurance fraud claims.
Today, the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department is investigating a suspected car insurance fraud. It believes a multi-car incident was completely staged. The collision involved a convoy of 3 cars driven by people who knew each other and were all travelling to the same place. DS Mark Forster and his team are aiming to make 3 arrests.
The guy we're going to see first off this morning is his involvement when he was driving at the back of the convoy, and is the vehicle that has allegedly caused this accident. The vehicle that was at the front of the convoy, front of the 3 vehicles, was a sports car. We suspect, or the whole reason for this accident claim and this insurance claim, was in order to get the sports car done up. There was large repair costs that were submitted to the insurers, PI, personal injury claims, replacement vehicle hire, credit exchange, and also even right the way down to recovery costs. But it totalled somewhere in the region of £80,000.
They believe the first suspect on the list was the driver of the car at the back of the convoy, who supposedly caused the crash by driving into the vehicle in front. It's 6:30 in the morning when Mark and his team arrive at the address. The father of the suspect comes out to meet them and wants to know what's going on.
London Police? It's Mike. We want to speak to him in connection to an insurance fraud that we believe he's involved in. That's all the detail I can give you, sir.
Right.
Okay. I can speak to him more about it, but I can't yourself. No, I take it you are, sorry, you're his father?
I'm his father, yeah.
Okay. Does he reside here, sir?
Yes, he
is.
He's in bed and he doesn't need to be disturbed.
Well, we need to speak to him, sir.
He reveals the first suspect is in the house, and the man in question eventually comes to talk to Mark.
We need to speak to you today, okay, in relation to a matter that's been referred to us,
right,
in relation to what we suspect is insurance fraud.
They take him down to the local police station for questioning. With 2 arrests still to be made, IFED gets back on the road.
He's just been booked in and just been put in a cell. He just came out with it, indicated that he knew what it was all about, and said that he didn't see any point in lying about any involvement. So I don't know what he's going to say on interview. We obviously didn't question him any further, but he asked if we were picking up any of the others that were involved, was his exact words. So what exactly that means, I don't know.
Next stop for the IFED team is a property where they believe the second and third suspects will both be. The second suspect was a passenger and put in a claim for personal injury. The third suspect is the owner of the sports car.
We think all these lads have got together, basically come up with this plan and decided to make up this accident and put in numerous claims from it.
They arrive at the property and are hopeful both suspects will be in. After securing the back of the building, they prepare to enter through the front. It's vital to the success of the case that they find and question the two suspects. But will they be at home?
How many clients you got?
9.
9. I'm further arresting you on suspicion of cultivation of cannabis.
Criminal gangs that commit car insurance fraud will stop at nothing to make a quick buck, and they don't care whose lives they're putting at risk. One such gang operated on the outskirts of London, and what they did endangered countless road users. They came to the attention of Detective Inspector Dave Hindmarsh, who heads up a special Met Police traffic unit. His team was set up to combat the organised criminal gangs who commit car insurance fraud through road traffic collisions.
Our team came across the gang for Operation Coronado, initially as a result of anonymous Crime Stoppers information.
The gang was using a dangerous technique the Met traffic units are well used to seeing on the UK's roads: the induced collision. First, the gang choose a victim. Then they move their two cars into position in front of the target. Gang car number 1 then slams on its brakes. Gang car 2 reacts by braking hard, resulting in a rear-end shunt from the victim. Gang car 1 then turns off at the next possible turning, pretending to be unaware of the crash. It's highly dangerous, and the consequences for other road users could be deadly. Operation Coronado was launched to gather proof of what was going on. The traffic unit set up video surveillance. It wasn't long before the intelligence they gathered showed the gang was working in a very specific area.
They go round the roundabout on the A127 some 9 times looking for their victim, their target.
The surveillance footage shows a black Golf and a green Saab, circling for over 6 minutes as they choose their prey. Eventually, they identify a suitable innocent driver.
The Golf brakes and turns left away from the Saab. The Saab brakes, over-exaggerates its braking and stops. Unfortunately, the young girl driving crashed into the back of their Saab, and then she in turn was hit by a white van.
The crash happens on the other side of the roundabout, and the covert filming team just catches the end of the incident.
I think they chose that particular victim because she was driving a relatively nice car, and she was a lone female, so she's not going to cause them any problems, and the likelihood is that she would be insured.
What was planned as a shunt had in seconds become a multi-vehicle pile-up.
I think the whole experience for the young girl was shocking and terrifying, not only to crash into a vehicle, but then to be hit from the rear.
But that's of zero concern to the gang, who waste no time in collecting their victims' insurance details so they can make a claim. To make the case stand up, the police needed to prove beyond doubt that there was a link between the two cars being driven by the gang members.
We can show that there is association before or after between both parties, then it assists us, and it is quite crucial in providing the best possible evidence to the jury.
The surveillance continued, and before long the gang is spotted trawling the roads for another victim. This time they're filmed inducing a collision on a motorway slip road. Car 1 brakes hard, Car 2 brakes even harder, and the target can't avoid crashing into the back of them. To ensure they have indisputable evidence, the police unit continue to trail the gang. Eventually their persistence pays off when both cars stop at a petrol station car park.
The meeting up at the petrol station shows association. It shows that the driver of the Golf and the driver of the Saab are known to each other. They've met up before. They've then caused a crash, which clearly is no random act. This was an induced collision done so that they could commit fraud against the insurance industry.
The evidence was impossible to argue with, and the gang was brought to justice with 12 defendants sentenced to a total of 19 years and 6 months. It was another successful result for the traffic unit, but there are still other fraudsters on the roads who care nothing for the safety of others.
It is a matter of time before someone is seriously hurt, and my team will use every method available in order to catch them, and that will be overt tactics, covert tactics, the use of the helicopter, the use of surveillance teams. Any tactic that we can think of, we will use to catch these people.
Technology is increasingly used to detect fraud, but in some cases it's used to create fraud too. However, insurers are working hard to stay one click ahead, as this next case demonstrates. Robin Reams is the Chief Claims Officer for an insurance company. They were contacted by a policyholder who reported an incident involving their vehicle.
The claim was for damage to a vehicle. It was a total loss, so quite significant damage to a car, approximately £10,000 worth, which would mean it was not something that we would repair.
Photos of the wreckage were sent to the insurer. Standard procedure for a claim of this size. But there was something about the images that was less than picture perfect.
Our suspicions were aroused because the photographs that we received of the damage to the car didn't look right. What struck us in particular was the damage to the front of the car. The quality of the photographs around the damage to the tyres and the front wheels were not consistent with the photograph quality of the rest of the car.
The case clearly required further scrutiny, so the insurer called in an expert to put the evidence under the microscope. Grant Ruffley is the forensic IT consultant asked to examine the images.
There's several methods we can look at to see if these images have been tampered with in any way. A lot of these images come from digital cameras and they hold a signature to the images similar to a fingerprint, which tells you where the picture was taken, what date, time, what exposure levels. In this case, digital fingerprint of these images removed.
The absence of this kind of data indicates that images have been altered from their original form. This didn't necessarily prove that the photos had been tampered with, but then other evidence started to mount up.
The images varied from very low resolution images to very high resolution images, which wasn't consistent with a general use of a digital camera.
The inconsistency is particularly noticeable in this picture of the interior.
As you can see here, it's a very high resolution image, consistent with a professional photographer. Somebody to take this type of shot would take probably 2 or 3 hours.
The discrepancies continued in other shots.
As you can see, the alloy wheel here is very rugby shaped as opposed to a normal wheel as you would expect round, especially with the wall of the tyre. It's very thick at the top here and then very thin. And goes virtually into nothing on the back of the alloy wheel there. This photo has been manipulated to show an alloy wheel which maybe wasn't on the vehicle at the time of the incident. It seems to be a better standard of alloy wheel than probably the one originally on the vehicle.
Not only were the pictures being altered, new elements were actually being added on, and the evidence of manipulation didn't stop there.
The airbags in this image are quite visible, and as you can see from this image here, there's no airbags visible in the windscreen.
Which leads to an unavoidable conclusion.
It could be possible that the person who's claiming for this vehicle is trying to insinuate it was a high-impact collision or hoping to have the vehicle written off.
The evidence of fraud was stacking up.
Our final conclusion with regards to the analysis of these photographs were in fact that they were poorly edited, and as such we believe that they were used in order to put forward a fraudulent claim.
A report of the examination was compiled and passed back to the insurer.
The expert found that those images had been tampered with, they'd been altered, they'd been taken from different cameras, and that the images that we had been sent showing damage to the car was not actually a true reflection of that damage.
A fraudulent claim was clearly being made, but on investigation, the insurer found that the driver of the wrecked vehicle was totally innocent. So they looked again at the other people who had been involved in the claim, the salvage yard and the assessor. What they uncovered next indicated a much more organised outfit.
The salvage yard sent the assessor some photographs of the actual car. The assessor then doctored those to superimpose damage from a similar vehicle that had more significant damage done to it, in order that that vehicle would be written off, when the real case was it probably was a car that could have been repaired at little value. The salvage agent would then be free to repair it and make a significant profit on selling it on later.
Although the case didn't result in a prosecution, the insurer recovered their losses. They're also able to recognise and combat this type of fraud more easily.
I think what surprised us was the lengths that somebody would go to doctor a photograph and actually not do it terribly well. But it is an indication of the lengths that many people will go to commit fraud, and the way that we, Swiftcover, need to have highly trained people to identify potential fraud, new methods, new ways of working, new scams, and that is a constant challenge for us.
IFED has come to arrest 3 suspects who they believe are connected to a suspected car insurance fraud. They arrested the first one early that morning and are pursuing the remaining 2 suspects. The trail has led them to a second property. The IFED team is optimistic they will find both suspects inside.
We're in.
As they enter the property, they are met by the second suspect.
All right, fella. Firstly, okay, I need to speak to you today regarding an allegation that's been made where it's alleged that you're involved in a conspiracy to defraud insurance companies. No. All right, hear me out, yeah? Okay, so in relation to that offence and that allegation, I'm arresting you on suspicion of conspiracy to defraud, and we'll be looking to interview you later on this morning.
Although there's no sign of the third suspect in the flat, they make an important discovery of another kind.
How many plants you got?
9.
9. I'm further arresting you on suspicion of cultivation of cannabis. All right, so in relation to that offence of cultivation of cannabis, I remind you are under caution. Yeah. All right? All right, no problem.
I'm proper scared now.
It's all right.
I don't like dealing with people on the street. I smoke weed, I've got my own bombs. I just sit in here and smoke weed.
That's the gentleman who we believe has submitted the PI claim. He was the passenger. Obviously, we've gone in there. I've arrested him in relation to that conspiracy to defraud. And we've uncovered there a sort of small little cultivation of cannabis sort of factory, if you like. He's got all the aircon machine and everything else. He's got about, he said, 9 plants in there, so he's cultivating cannabis, although he says it's for his own personal use. It's quite a lot of cannabis.
Birthday yesterday.
Sorry?
It's my birthday yesterday.
Happy birthday for yesterday.
Good, isn't it? Take a seat. Try and drive carefully.
The search continues for the third suspect, the owner of the sports car.
We're on our way now to a company address where we know that one of the individuals involved in this fake claim is it's his place of work, basically. They're like the body repair shop, and a lot of the repairs to the damage and things were meant to have been done through this company. So we've got 2 arrested so far, as you're aware. We're going to go and pick up this guy, he'll be the third. First chap this morning has been interviewed. Scott's interviewed him this morning. He's just come out of interview, and the guy's admitted on interview that this accident is a complete fabrication. 2 of the vehicles were taken to the scene where the accident was meant to happen, and one was deliberately driven down the side of the other. The rest of the damage was then caused back at body repair shop in the yard there, and they've caused damage to 2 of the other vehicles. And then just got together, put a claim in, alleging that the accident has occurred. So that's quite good progress for us.
With the first suspect's confession, the case is looking strong. But IFED still needs to arrest and question the third suspect.
Listen. Hello, mate. I'm Mark Fulson from City London Police, okay, Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department. Right. Okay. I need to speak to you about an allegation that's been made, okay, where the allegation is that you have conspired with others to defraud insurance company, all right, namely the all right. So in relation to that, okay, I'm going to have to arrest you, okay? You don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Okay, anything you do say may be given evidence. And that's in relation, like I say, conspiracy to defraud, okay? We'll have to take you away now, okay? Is this your boss here, or are you in charge, or whatever?
I'm in charge, yeah.
Right, stick it in the cage, mate. All right, jump in. It's gone very, very smoothly. Very pleased that we've had one interview where the suspect has admitted that this is completely a fraud, and I fully expect that these 3 individuals will be charged in the very near future. So the message is, if you are committing this type of fraud and you continue to do so, then you'll probably get a visit from officers from the City of London Police.
With all the suspects tracked down and arrested, IFED has achieved its objective. The investigation is ongoing, but the confession of the first suspect means the case is looking strong. It's been another successful day for the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department.